Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
We are here to unpick this intersection of binge eating and ADHD. And recently I heard the statistic that 30% of people who binge eat also have ADHD. As somebody who knows a lot about neurodivergence, we're going to get into a bit about your story and your background. But to begin with, does that statistic surprise you?
No, no, it
Tell me
doesn't.
why.
Um, so I've been working with people who have binge eating and different disordered, dysregulated eating for about 5 or 6 years. So I saw a lot of it. And now we understand so much more about it. So yeah, it's a really common thing that people experience.
There's very little content on it, though. Even searching on YouTube, I struggle to find much about ADHD and binge eating,
Yeah.
considering there's such a massive overlap.
Yep.
I'm guessing a lot of people watching this are either have ADHD or see themselves as ADHD leaning and also recognize that feeling of being out of control around food. Why then does having ADHD make something like binge eating more likely?
So I think there's a couple of reasons. I mean, there's many, many reasons because also this is complex, right? Because human beings are complex.
No way.
They are indeed, we are indeed. But I mean, the main things that really stand out for me when I work with clients who are struggling with this is that ADHD is or neurodivergent people, because it's also important to remember that about 70% of autistic people are also ADHD. Not everybody that is ADHD is going to have autistic traits, but it's just really helpful to know that when I use the term neurodivergent, I'm kind of talking about ADHDers, which are people who have a dual diagnosis of ADHD and autism, but kind of just neurodivergence in general. But we experience a less flexible nervous system. So neurodivergent people, and especially ADHDers, will have more kind of fight and flight in our nervous system, a more mobilized, adrenalized experience of life. So when we are in this threat response, or if we have a lot of energy, we have a lot of kind of activation in our bodies, this can sometimes lead to undereating or overeating or completely dysregulated eating and this feeling of loss of control. So that's the first thing, really.
Okay, that's the first thing. So there's going to be more to come. Okay.
There's definitely more to come.
So if we start with that, so some people might not have heard that phrase, this idea that it's a less flexible nervous system, because the way I tend to read it or see it in the literature is they just call it emotional dysregulation.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of that term because I think people then just see themselves as too emotional. So
Yes.
why do you talk about it? Why do you use that phrase then? Why do you think about it from a nervous system perspective? How's that helpful?
Mm. So it's really helpful to know that we need all of our different parts of our nervous system. So we need to be able to have our fight flight part of our nervous system that makes us kind of activated and energized and meet deadlines and run to the school when we're late and find our keys quickly because we always lose them, to try and hopefully get somewhere on time. We need that kind of energy within us, but we also need to be able to rest and digest our food. So we often hear rest and digest, which is the other part of our nervous system, what's called the parasympathetic part of our nervous system, which helps us to be calmer, which helps us to slow down. And that's a really key piece that for many ADHDers, it can be hard to slow things down because we have a lot of this fight flight energy, and we can't always find our way back to this more relaxed, restful place. It feels clunkier to get to, harder
Okay.
to find.
So I do want to go into that a bit more about what might be possible. And also, I'm sure we'll touch on impulsivity, which is part of
Mm-hmm.
this. Dopamine chasing is often associated with food, right? But
Mm-hmm.
obviously, I'm noticing that you're saying we a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So maybe you could just tell us a bit about kind of your background because you have ADHD, right? And you're a
Yeah.
therapist.
Yes. I mean, the first thing to say is that I didn't know I was ADHD until I started working, mostly with people who had disordered eating, binge eating. And it was almost like this process of them learning about their relationship with food, their neurodivergence, and then me doing that alongside them and realizing oh, that sounds awfully familiar. Oh, that sounds awfully familiar. And then here we are, I was 35 years old before I got my diagnosis, which really helped me to make sense of the years and the years before that of two very common states for myself, which were either food obsession, nutrition obsession, which really is hyperfocus. When I'm interested in nutrition, I'm hyper-focused on learning. Give me all the information about this. Or I'm obsessing about, and I'm talking about this previous because I've done a lot of work on this since, so it's not the case now. But when I was younger, certainly I was obsessive about food and learning about it because I wanted to be healthier and I wanted to be thinner all the time. And when I say all the time, and this is the piece that I think is really key, that makes it feel a different experience to other people, is that I thought about this from the minute I opened my eyes to the minute my brain finally let me sleep at night. It was like a constant whirring all day. There was no let up.
You've started to notice this in yourself when you've been working with other people who are neurodivergent. How do you respond to this idea? And there are people out there who are going, I think I might have ADHD or autism or ADHD, but there's a part of them that feels like, oh, but am I just jumping on the bandwagon? Because does it feel like now everybody thinks that they must be neurodivergent? Because a lot of neurodivergent traits are human traits, but it's about a scale. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a scale, but it's being able to, in terms of the diagnostic criteria, if you go to see a psychologist or psychiatrist, it's that you have to meet those criteria in different areas. So when we talked about emotional dysregulation earlier, that's one of those criteria that you would have to meet if you were ADHD. So what that might look like day to day is that you do have more intensity around your emotion. You feel things very, very deeply. So it might be that, yeah, you feel very passionately about learning something, or you feel very passionately about being bored or uninterested, disinterested in something as well. It might be that you experience a sense of shame or guilt very intensely, or joy, like energy, embodiment, or you might feel very, very low and closed off from the world in this very kind of disengaged place from the world. And a lot of ADHD has experienced that as well. And sometimes that comes from being in this fight and flight place. So being adrenalized, sort of overwhelmed by life, overstimulated by life, busy, busy, busy for a long time. You then get this kind of, this lethargy, this almost collapse in your body. And that can come with low mood, and that can come with struggles around eating.
Because that collapse that you talk about, I'm so familiar with that feeling, the feeling of collapse. And that was a massive binge trigger for me. I would say, though, in a state of collapse, it was a lot more about, it wasn't the same kind of frantic binging that I would get when I was restricting, but it felt like, for example, in a state of collapse, I would want the eating to be elongated over a long period of time compared to like a short binge. And it would often come because in a state of transition as well. And transitions might be helpful to touch upon too, because I know of transitions more in autism. I'm curious how it might show up in ADHD.
Yeah.
But for me, the coming home or the finishing work or going from one thing to another thing, food or binging at that time became like the transitionary object to allow me to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really key point, because transitions for ADHDers often feel very difficult to actually approach, or also just embody, just live. Like, how do we move from one thing to another to another? How do we go from being at work to then being at home to then trying to rest at bedtime? All of these transitions feel difficult, often because of the nervous system stuff. So all of the activation that we feel, the feeling of always needing to continue. There's always another thing, another thing, another thing. So that inability, sometimes, I'm going to say inability, that's quite a strong word, but to kind of dial it down is one of those hard things, because we don't want to be pulled away from one thing to another, because we're kind of on that thing. but all of the different steps that are involved in switching. That is really key for ADHDers. And that leads to the other part of kind of my story, which is that I really, really struggle with executive functioning difficulties and differences around food. I would say that that is one of the reasons why we see so many people who have binge eating challenges also have a diagnosis of ADHD because of the executive functioning. So shall I explain a bit more about what that
Yeah,
looks like?
yeah. So, yeah, what is executive functioning or executive dysfunctioning? How's that going to be problematic with eating?
Yeah. So when I learned about this, I was like, oh God, this again, it makes so much sense. I was fine when I lived at home and my mum and I would talk about food, what we're going to have for dinner, what do you want for lunch? We body doubled a lot. So I was able to think about food and then actually do the thing to put the food in my body. And often when we have executive functioning challenges, we find it hard to do the sequencing of events, to think about the food, prepare the food, eat the food, clean the food away. Those are 4 really big steps that if you are already very busy, you don't feel like you can stop, you're feeling really fatigued in your brain, it can be hard to make the decision, find a clean spoon, even find a clean plate, because often as ADHDers, we live in disorganization and mess. Not always, but often.
Okay.
So there's so many steps involved in it, and that can feel really, and I say this, from a very personal experience, it can be debilitating at times, because sometimes I'm either so hyper focused on this nutrition and this food and fueling myself with all of this beautiful nutrition, or I just can't think straight. I've got no energy, I'm burnt out, I can't decide on what to cook. So then I just eat crackers, crisps, and Baby Bells. And that is all I could live off for days sometimes, because I couldn't put the things in place to feed myself.
Okay. So if someone listening to this recognizes that in themselves, like, yeah, I struggle with that executive dysfunction around food,
Mm,
what can help? When someone knows that like this is a challenge for them, how might they be able to help themselves?
yeah, it's a really good question. And, you know, like lots of things, there's never one just quick answer to it. But I really think the first thing is just to offer yourself a little bit of kindness around that. Because, as I was talking about that, I can feel the shame coming up around that. I'm a therapist. In my brain, I know what I should be doing. I know how to help myself, but it can still feel really, really hard. So just acknowledging it and saying, like, it's okay that we struggle with this. It's probably something that I'm going to struggle with forever, but I do have tools and I do have the awareness now to support myself, which is the difference between where I'm at now in my life and where I was, 5 years ago.
Mhm. So what are some of the tools that have helped you?
Yeah, some of the tools. First thing is invite yourself to slow down and give yourself a break in your day, because it's really, really easy to not think about yourself and your basic sort of physiological needs of like actually just needing to put food in your body. So recognizing that maybe you're somebody that moves from one thing to another, to another, to another, and reminding yourself it's okay to take a break and it's okay to find some space in my day for something.
Is there something in there
Mm.
as well about it could be challenging to even admit that you need a break? Because when it feels like you can keep going, I know, like, I'm not saying I officially have ADHD. I can certainly see some traits. I will maybe describe myself as ADHD leaning, but part of me will go, especially if I've got that energy or I perceive I've got that energy, this is going on in my system. I don't want to stop. I don't want to have a
Yeah.
break. I don't
Oh,
need a
yeah.
break. Breaks are for other people need breaks. I don't need a break.
It's so true. I mean, and that was me for years. It's like people would ask me, but Nicole, when are you going to have your lunch break? And I'd be like, what lunch break? That's like, I don't need one. I'm fine. Baby Bell, half a cracker. Because there is that desire to keep going. And that is when I talked about that less flexible nervous system, that's what we're talking about here, this sort of excitement that can tip into anxiety, adrenaline, not really knowing how to slow down. So yeah, admitting it can be really, really hard. Even recognizing that we have that pattern can be really hard. And I think that's where sometimes talking these things through with other people can be really helpful to bring that self-awareness to it. It's like, oh yeah, I tend to do that. Okay, so what next? So you invite yourself to slow down. You maybe put in some space in your diary. If you are self-employed, that takes more self-discipline. If you have a manager, if you are employed and you have a diagnosis of ADHD and you feel comfortable talking about this, ask your employers, like, when can I take my lunch break? Like, actually raise this and talk about how and when you can start to have pockets of time in your day. And that was one of the things that when I've worked with ADHD business coaches, they really encourage, is to work with people on your team to encourage you to take breaks, because we just don't always. We'll just keep going.
I just want to add one thing about breaks for anybody who might be struggling with the idea of letting themselves have one or planning one in. It's a little bit like with eating in binge eating recovery. One of the bits of wisdom is to get out ahead of hunger. So don't always wait until you're hungry to eat, because we want to signal to the brain and the body that food is available and it's coming. And I guess it's a similar thing with a break, like having a break before you actually need, when I say need one, feel like you physically have to have one.
Yeah.
I think that could be enormously helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually, to try and get ahead of it. And I think the more that we do these things, like anything, the more that it becomes less of a demand. So a lot of neurodivergent people will experience this feeling of demand avoidance, or a demand that just feels uncomfortable. And I think a lot of ADHDers will talk about the demand around having to eat at all, having to pause, having to stop. So just what you were saying, it feels like a demand. I don't want to do it. I feel like something else or someone else is telling me I have to do this. And in this case, it's the body. What are you thinking there, Sarah?
I'm just relating so hard. I remember just being like, oh, it was so annoying to me that I had to think about food and plan what to feed my body.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And also I spoke about this on my last video as well.
Okay. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I've struggled with so much. If I didn't have a wonderful partner that feels able to prepare food and cook food and things after work, I mean, I would just live off Baby Bells and plain crackers and whatever else is there around me. You know, that's what I do now. It's different. When I was younger, because I had a lot more food available to me when I lived at home, then I would often be out of control around food and it would be too much, and all of that sort of disorganization around it. But yeah, the demand avoidance, the transitions, the changing your focus, the feeling unable to kind of move out of that really kind of focused, adrenalized state. These are all common challenges that ADHDers will be experiencing.
Something that's helped me with demand avoidance is I have to pull it back to a choice. So let's say, I'm feeling resistant to the fact that I have to think about or prepare food, is I will pull it back to, okay, you don't have to. Like, I don't have to. I don't have to think about my meals. I don't have to plan my meals. I don't have to do any of that. And I know that if I don't, my eating is going to become more dysregulated.
Yeah.
But I still offer it to myself as a choice. It's the only way I can get myself to do these things. I'm like, you don't have to. This is what's going to happen. Now, what would you like to do? And I keep presenting it back to myself as a choice. Sometimes joke, I don't have to do my tax return. Like, I really don't have to. Like, no one can make me do my tax return. The consequences of not doing my tax return, let me think about that. Would I prefer to do my tax return or not do my tax return and take the consequences?
Yeah.
Is that, because I've heard before, there's something in the executive dysfunction for people with ADHD where it's maybe perhaps more challenging to think about the consequences?
Yeah, I think so. What is often difficult is to think past the now. It's like ADHD is experienced now or not now. So being able to project forwards can feel really difficult. And I think that's the same, again, if you're ADHD, if people feel that they've got autistic traits as well, it can be just really hard sometimes to think about it in a way that often isn't. So the future can often be hard to think about because it's hard to get to, because you just want to think about the right now.
Mm-hmm.
Or the future is hard to think about because it's just scary. And then you just get this flood of anxiety where it's like, oh God, when I start to think about the future, it's like, oh, overwhelming, scary, don't really want to do that. So then we come back to the now. So when you're trying to work on your relationship with food, you're trying to nourish your body so that you can just function in your life, all of those things can make it just really tricky, really tricky. And I really want, to name that and validate that this is not a small thing. We are human beings that are supposed to fuel ourselves multiple times a day, every single day for the rest of our lives. It's like, oh. And when you struggle with it, it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard.
Yeah, because I sometimes think about that, and I think about how boring, or more boring, food became in recovery. Because there's something quite exciting when you're in and out of the binge and then trying to control. It's like when you're in the binge, you're in a free-for-all. That can be quite liberating, but then all the shame comes, but then the promises to do better, and you get excited about what you're going to do differently next time, and you go on this roller coaster. Now, something else with an ADHD brain is the draw to novelty, right? So I'm curious, like what we understand about this with ADHD, sort of novelty versus routine. What do we know about that?
Again, I mean, I'm rolling my eyes for myself here because it feels like a lifelong battle, because I feel like I want routine all the time to help me with food. And that's where I go into that like hyper focus of, I'm going to do this nutrition plan. And, previously when I was steeped into diet culture, it'd be like, I'm going to do this diet. I'm going to do it like this, like this, like this. And then I just could not stick to anything for like a couple of days at all. And I just couldn't make any decisions around any of it because I always was looking for the next new thing, the next new thing. So yeah, this seeking novelty is linked to those dopamine fluctuations that ADHDers experience. So what we have found, and what the science, shows now, is that it's not that ADHD is a deficit in dopamine, that we don't have enough, that our base level is, low and forever low. It's not that. It's that it's fluctuating. And that there are times in the day and then times in our lives where we experience a lot more dopamine, and other times where we are feeling very low, and then we need to seek for it. We're trying to find it in things, activities, food, relationships, gambling, the phone, whatever it might be.
What's your thought of these dopamine menus? I think they call them, this idea of having a list of dopamine producing activities or things. Because am I right in thinking that there are certain activities that produce, I don't know what the word is, more like a more reliable, steady release of dopamine compared to spikes and crashes?
Yes. Yeah, I think those can be really helpful because I just think it can be helpful for us to have a different, like an array of things that we can do that become ways to regulate and to soothe. What we don't want to tip into is a demand again of this shame-based, oh, I'm seeking dopamine, that's bad. My therapist told me I should do something different, and then I've got to do it, and then the demand avoidant kicks in, and then it all is wrapped up in this idea of like, this is something that you get wrong, so you need to do something to get it right. I think that's a really key part of it. And when I'm working with clients, it's about trying to just accept who we are and what we find challenging, but also what really benefits us and what our strengths are within our neurodivergence. And that sense of novelty can be really helpful because it means we're adaptable. It means that we can find dopamine in different things. That's great. And yeah, trying to find things that are going to make it more sustainable rather than, like you said, that balance. It's like it's described as this balance. Some things are super, super high dopamine, which means that after the event, we crash the other way. So we want to find things that are a little bit more balancing, a bit more regulating. And that's going to be different for everyone.
So a lot of the often dopamine chasing activities you might think of would be things like food, gaming, social media, those kinds of things that are, as we understand it, designed to hijack our dopaminergic system.
Yes.
So what are other things that have been shown to release dopamine in a more because I don't want to moralize this. I don't want to be like, oh, this is better and like this is bad, but in a more regulating way, more long-term
Yeah.
regulating way.
Yeah. So movement, I think this is where I always want to start with. First of all, it's free and you can do it with other people if you want to. So if you're somebody that likes to body double, so body doubling, if people haven't come across this before, is this idea of using somebody else there to kind of help you do the thing you want to do, or the thing you've got to do, like your tax return. But if you're somebody that really wants to move on your own or just do things more solo, then you can move on your own. You can watch a YouTube video, you can do it in private. But movement really increases our dopamine, our endorphins, our there's so much in terms of regulation of the nervous system as well that happens when we move our bodies. And that doesn't mean you have to go out and start running 10K. Doesn't mean you have to do a headstand in yoga. Doesn't have to mean you do any of that stuff. It literally just means, can you actually start to just move your body in a way that helps you to free up out of what can feel like a very stuck place. When we are in a binge, about to binge, after a binge, when we're stuck on social media, on our phones, we can literally feel like in a freeze state or in this collapse state. And the way that we can move out of that is if we move somehow. Gently is how I start with, and then you can build it up to something more expressive if that works for you.
Or you have the urge to move not gently, then kind
Absolutely.
of it's learning to listen to, I guess, what your body responds to too. Because some people might need faster movement and other people might need slower movement to regulate.
Yeah. I always talk about matching the intensity. So if you feel quite heightened in your body, if you feel this intense energy, and that might lead you to binge sometimes, it might lead you to do whatever you feel like is going to be more destructive. Actually came to mind there, just because some of the words that my clients will use, they'll say like, I know I'm about to do that destructive thing. If you're feeling up here, then yeah, you might need that more expressive movement, shaking, pushing against a wall, punching a pillow, whatever it might be, or you start low.
Connections with other people, that produces dopamine, right? You and I having this conversation, will this be producing more dopamine in our brains because we're having an engaged conversation?
Yeah, for sure. And for me, it's like my special interest. I love therapy. I love working with the nervous system, and I really love talking about neurodivergence. So for me, because this is my special interest, any topic around this, my dopamine's like, woo, and I can feel it in my body. And if somebody else wants to talk about it, I'm like, great, I love this person now because they want to talk about my special interests.
And I can see you lighting up already, like the dopamine is flowing. Because I'm so interested in connection. And even just that when you're listening to something sometimes and you feel that resonance and that connection, like something's happening in our brain. Again, I'm a bit reluctant to declare that to be dopamine because I probably don't know enough about it to be saying things like that. But if people out there are interested in connecting and even meeting you, Nicole, and learning from you. So at the end of September, this is in 2025, I'm opening up my home for 10 people to join me, and Nicole's going to join us for some of that weekend to work on some of this stuff around binge eating, ADHD, figuring out what's possible, because it's pretty tiring on Zoom as well. So much of our learning is online. So I'm interested in to get onto screens in a minute as well. But if anybody is interested in joining us in September, there will be some details in the description and you can have a look at that. But let's talk about focus then, because attention deficit, that's the first two words of ADHD. So that's a pretty big part of it. That challenge of being able to hold your focus at will. Is that what it is? That you can choose where to put your focus is not as straightforward?
Yeah. And straightforward, I think, is a really helpful word, isn't it? Because I think certainly before we understood neurodivergence and ADHD, it was just like, why can't you just do that thing? Why can't you? And it's like, well, actually, I can. ADHDers can. We can find our focus. We can find our hyper focus on things that we're really interested in that feel good. And I talk about the body a lot within my work because I've really noticed that neurodivergent people can be extremely embodied. Sometimes we struggle with interoception and understanding our body signals, and that's maybe another part of the conversation. But often we do feel, we have stims, we move our bodies, we love sounds, we feel really drawn to certain colors. You know, we are feeling very, very embodied. So now I'm not sure where I'm going with this point, because I'm starting thinking about that. Here is my ADHD in a very
You're just in a world of color right now. Come back. We're back to Zoom. Back to Zoom.
back to Zoom. We were talking about focus. Oh my God, the irony. We can put it where we want to, and we can find it really difficult to put it where we don't want to, basically, is what we're saying.
But want's an interesting word, because you could want to do something because you know it would make your life easier, but you're not really interested in it. You don't feel emotionally engaged with it. And that, I suppose, is where the conflict is.
Yes, that was the point. Thank you, Sarah. It was that if we don't get this felt sense of being in it, we really, really struggle. We really struggle. So there is something that can feel so intense in our bodies when we are interested in something. And you can see that when you're around neurodivergent people that come to life. Like I was saying about, I'm talking about my special interest, so I feel really animated. I can feel that. I can focus on this. I can mostly ignore the majority of things that are happening around me. But yeah, if we just don't have that interest, we kind of want to do it. Like, I really want to be able to cook a 3-course meal. Can I, if I'm really not interested in it, or I don't have a particular reason to do it? I just can't. I mean, a 1-course meal would be fine sometimes.
A meal, food, eating.
A meal, yeah.
Here's the challenge as I see it. One of the challenges, or maybe it's all of the challenges. Let's find out. Is that, okay, so ADHD provides some challenges and difficulties in this particular area. There's also like joys and benefits to having ADHD as well. So this is like, I'm just going to name that off the top.
Definitely.
But with the things that are challenging, so let's say someone with ADHD struggles with binge eating, and then the solution to binge eating recovery or no longer binging is things like eating regularly, emotional regulation, all these other things that we know help. But not only are they more vulnerable to binge eating because of some of the traits of ADHD, but the solutions become more challenging because of having ADHD. So we need to offer some hope here, Nicole.
Yes.
We don't want people to get to the end of this and go like, yes, I really resonated with that. But now I just feel worse than ever because I've realized like how big this is. And you used the word battle earlier as well. But also you're an example of somebody who has got into a much better regulated place with food. There are still challenges. But I wonder if perhaps you could speak to that a bit. Give us all some hope, Nicole. No pressure.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much hope to be had. And, you know, I experience challenges sometimes, but not all the time. And it fluctuates like many things in life. But I think being able to work with somebody, or if you're able to pick up a book and, you know, find ways to start doing this yourself, just first of all, know that if you're struggling with putting some of these steps in place, that might be because you struggle with executive functioning, and it's not because you're useless and that you can't do it. It just might mean that it needs to take a bit more time, and it might need to be broken down into more kind of manageable steps that are clearer. Because I don't know about you, but I find that sometimes I start reading all of these things. It's like I was saying earlier, and you just get so overwhelmed with all the information, it sets you into this kind of paralysis state, and you don't really know where to start. So the first thing, as always, is please don't be hard on yourselves. Reach out to people if you can, you know, if you want to, or find those resources, and then try and break it down and just find one thing, do one thing. Don't try to sort out your breakfast, lunch, and your dinner straight away. If you don't want to, put your breaks in at work and start with, lunch, maybe don't do that. Try and focus on one meal a day that you try to nourish yourself with. Or maybe you don't even start with food at all. And this is sometimes an approach that I have, with my clients, is that actually that is sometimes too emotional, too difficult, too emotive to start with, and we just go somewhere else. Let's look at, movement, or let's look at your sleep. Let's look at what are your interests, and kind of start from the outskirts and then work our way in, because it can feel really alarming sometimes to almost take on what we feel is the battle straight away.
Yeah, yeah. And I talk about that sometimes as well in a slightly different way, because if food feels like one of the biggest issues in your life, you're trying to do something new in the hardest, most difficult, challenging area of your life. And I understand the impatience as well, right? Because part of the impulsivity, there can be that impatience, like you say,
For
they're
sure.
living in the now, which sometimes in certain spiritual circles, like that's the goal. But it's like they're in the now, but there's also impatience at the same time. It's like they're living in now. You said like now and not now, both at the same time. The other thing that I wanted to mention, because you were saying about how this is not that you're just like useless or not trying hard enough. For the longest time, that was my story, because I was trying so desperately to stop binge eating, and I continued to do it. And so the only solution my brain came up with is you're not trying hard enough. You're not trying hard enough. And I could see people getting into a similar cycle with people that have ADHD. I also often talk about self-compassion as a regulator, like that feeling, that emotion of compassion and self-compassion. It's really organizing, like in the brain. Everything kind of settles down a bit when you hear other people. You know, that resonance that goes, oh, I'm not alone. And you just feel a little bit better. You release some of the self-judgment, because ultimately it's not even, if the word self-compassion doesn't resonate, what we're talking about here is letting go of the judgment.
Yeah.
Whether you think of self-compassion as the opposite of that, but that self-judgment, I think in whatever problem you have in life, and I'm not talking about a lack of accountability, but the judgment, the part that goes like, I am so wrong and so broken and such a mess that I can't do anything here. That is, oh, I know that feeling so well. Fortunately, not anywhere near how I used to feel it, but yeah, that's part of my goal. Is I just don't want anybody to feel like that about this problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And the living and breathing the problem all day, every day, right? That constant feeling of it is never enough and I've got to work harder. And I hear that so often with the people that I work with, even just sort of friends, and, it's really common in late diagnosed or self-diagnosed neurodivergent women and AFABs to really experience this sense of rejection, this sense of not being good enough, being too much or not enough, and just like, where do we fit? Where do we find peace? Where do we come to this place in the now, but with peace? So in spiritual circles, that being in the present comes with a letting go. But for ADHDers, the now is now, with all of this fear, this judgment, this criticism of I've got to change now. Not tomorrow, not Monday, although maybe I will start Monday. That often we hear a lot, obviously. But we've got to change now because I've just never been quite good enough. So I don't have any longer to wait.
Yeah.
And that's exhausting.
We're all living in this diet culture world. And, I've known people with ADHD that in the hyper focus state, I mean, they can diet, they can stick to it and they can diet. And because weight loss is a dopamine producer, that's for sure. Like that reward,
Definitely.
that mental reward of losing weight and then wanting to chase that feeling.
Yeah.
Could be
And
exacerbating.
the social reward as well, starting to see it. Other people starting to see it and mentioning it. So that relational piece that you were talking about earlier, when other people start to mention it and suddenly you feel connected. It's not true, calm connection, but it is still getting what you often want, which is to feel admiration yourself. Like, oh, great, I think I look like I'm making change here, which is what I want. And other people are noticing it as well. Great, loads of dopamine in that.
Yeah. And especially if you've gone through, your childhood, adolescence into adulthood, feeling like you were somehow like wrong. Maybe you didn't know you had ADHD. That search for social approval becomes like all the more important. Like you're the hungrier for it because you feel like you haven't had it.
Yeah, the weight loss element of it, I think, is is really key, because, and I mean, obviously it's really key in what we talk about all the time, but for ADHDers, because it can, like you say, it can happen very quickly and very easily if there is an ability to hyperfocus and if there's a lot of hyperactivity, because then they can start to overexercise. So the weight loss can become very possible for a short period of time, as we know, it often doesn't last. For a lot of people with ADHD, that's not always the case, you know, and I've worked with people who really struggle to lose weight, who don't experience so much hyperactivity. They might experience, you know, a lot more, in the medical term of inattentiveness, you know, again, all terms I don't really like or kind of resonate with, but this ability to not get started on something, feeling that kind of that freeze state or that lethargy, decision fatigue, paralysis, that can be really hard as well. And so I guess what I'm saying, none of these things feel easy.
No. Which is why connection is so important. And that's why you should come and join us in September. But I know, I appreciate it's just not within everybody's means. But I think one of the things I just love about where we are in time is that we're in this world of information. And there are so many podcasts, other YouTube channels, places where people are talking about this, the experience of this, where people can go and go, oh, me too. Like I had that feeling of belonging here.
If people want to learn more about what we do, and maybe if we want to continue the conversation, anything like that, I don't know, do we want to talk about it again? Obviously I can talk about it. But I don't know if there's just anything like a different angle. Do we want to talk about, I mean, we didn't talk about interoception. No. So I don't know if so that is really key, that a lot of neurodivergent people don't know how to read their body signals, and they can't, and it really links into misunderstanding or not understanding their hunger signals and their satiety signals. That's kind of where I'd almost say that's where we want to start. If you want to change your relationship with food or your body image, is actually just start to get to know what sensations you feel, and maybe start exploring what feels really low and hard to read in your body, and then we can work with that. And don't worry about the food stuff that's on your plate or not on your plate. We can get to that, but actually we need to start with, what are you feeling? Are you feeling hungry? Or are you just not feeling hungry at all? Are you drinking 4 cups of black coffee a day and not feeling any hunger? Or are you feeling hungry all day, every day, and never full? These, I think, are really key aspects, again, of learning what our neurodivergent felt senses of being in the world.
Yeah. Is there anything you would offer to anybody who's trying to figure that stuff out, who can't work with somebody to do that? Because that's the kind of thing it's really helpful to have conversations about when you're trying to figure out sensation and what's what.
Yoga. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head other than yoga, Pilates, dance, movement, something that allows you to kind of start in one state and then maybe finish in a slightly different state. Somatic classes, if you like to dance, ecstatic dance, they will, you know, ecstatic dances allow you to feel more into what's happening in your body as you journey through a whole dance for an hour or 2 hours or something. But yeah, there's so much out there that will help you to feel a bit more and get that awareness.
And your work is very much with the body as well. And so if people want to reach out to you or even find out how they can work with you, we'll pop your details below as well. It feels to me like we're only just scratching the surface here, and that there is a need out there for more information about this topic. So I'm just trying to think where we might go from here. And perhaps if people watching this have questions that we haven't even managed to get to, because I was thinking we'd be able to cover a lot more in the time that we have, and we haven't covered as much as I expected to. But that if people are interested in me getting Nicole back on for a Q&A, if you want to pop some Q&As in the comments, Nicole might be able to offer some brief answers, but perhaps we could record another video and do it like a Q&A. What are the questions that people who have ADHD and are struggling with binge eating, what are the questions that people want answered? What is it that they need? So we might need you guys to tell us that, and we will come back and do this again if it's going to be something that's helpful for people.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great plan.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming along on the channel.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.